In today's episode, the static grass is laid, I build a control panel, and build a fence. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, for episode 5 of building a 009 layout inside a suitcase. Before we get into the video though, I just want to say a massive thank you to both D-Rails and Warworld Scenics, who have both very kindly sponsored this video. So thank you again to them for helping to make this entire series possible, and I'll be talking about both of them a little later on in the video. Now, the layout is coming along nicely, but since it now has its first exhibition booked in just a few weeks' time, I really need to ramp up the pace in order to get everything done. The good news though is that today I'm going to get one of the major scenery jobs completed, and I'll start adding little details around the layout too. It's going to be a busy episode, so sit back, relax and enjoy, and let's get to it. So this is where we left Gofod Tynn in the previous episode, with the yard in the centre of the layout having gained a surface and the hillside being covered in lots of small stones from Warworld Scenics. The layout is looking a little bit stark at the moment though, so I'm going to bring some life to it by adding static grass. The first layer I'm going to put down will just be a general base layer, and for this I need to cover the entire area in glue first. I'll also add a few little dots of glue here and there around the rocks as well, just where I think the grass might poke through any gaps. I'll be using Warworld Scenic static grass throughout this video, and for the base layer I'm using their 2mm summer grass. I have to say I've used Warworld Scenic static grass on nearly all my layouts at this point, and I love the results I can get with them so easily. And this base layer really is just a general covering over the entire area. I do find that the 2mm summer grass is the stuff I go through the quickest, so I always tend to have a large bag of it to hand. You can see as well I'm keeping the wire from the applicator fairly near to the area I'm working on. In this case it's actually resting in the glue. I don't know if this makes much of a difference to be honest, but I certainly find it easier to work this way. I'm then going to do exactly the same thing over on the right hand side of the hill above the rock face. And I'll also add some of the glue down the side of the hill and in this little area beside the tunnel mouth too. You may also be able to see the dirt verges I added alongside the track and ballast in the previous episode too. I'm adding the glue right up to these and overlapping it a bit as well, so that when the grass does go down, the two will blend together naturally. And then with the glue down, again it's a really quick job to add the 2mm grass over the top of this. And if we just step back for a moment, this is what it looks like when the excess fibres have been cleared away. Even though this is still drying, you can see how much of a difference getting a bit of greenery on the layout has already made. I'm going to fill in the open areas around the track too, basically anywhere the baseboard is painted brown. And as you can see, small areas like this are really quick to do. There's also this slightly larger area on the left hand side of the layout to do as well, which actually stretches all the way back up to the tunnel mouth on this side. And I'm adding a couple of grass verges too, again just following the curve of the track and blending it into the Geoscenics dirt I put down previously. I'll do the same on the other side too, and in both cases this just helps to create a bit more of a boundary between the running line and the yard. And since I haven't mentioned it yet, for cleanup I'm just using a very small simple battery powered vacuum to suck up all the excess. This is very satisfying to do, but another benefit is that by collecting it up this way I can reuse all this excess, which is very handy considering how often I use this stuff. The last little area I'm going to do for now though is around the sidings. Again, I've previously used the Scenics powder around the track here to really bed it into the ground. I want to make this look even more overgrown though, since these sidings probably weren't as well maintained as the running line. So to make sure there's grass everywhere, I'm even adding it between the rails too. That said, if you do try this yourself, make sure you wipe any excess glue off the rails, otherwise you'll end up with grass stuck to them. Finally, a few little dots are added around this area just to fade the grass out a bit and give it a more patchy effect. Then it's back to the fun bit again of actually adding the grass, and this time I'm using the 4mm spring grass from Warworld Scenics. So instead of this being thick grass like I've added elsewhere on the layout, this will give it more of an impression of weeds and we'll still be able to see through to the ground texture beneath this. And just to continue this theme of patches of weeds, I've added a few more dots of glue around the rest of the yard too, mostly sticking to the outer edges. And the last area I'm going to add this effect to is between the track in the station loop. I'll add some little patches of glue around the outside as well, although I'll make this more sporadic as I don't want it to look too consistent. I don't really have a reference for this, it just feels right, but certainly on smaller railways I feel like it's not uncommon for there to be a little bit of grass in the middle of the loop. So now it's time to leave all this to dry for a bit, but there's still more static grass to come later on. Now before we move on, I just want to say thank you again to Warworld Scenics, or WWS as you may know them as, for sponsoring this video. All the static grass I've been putting down on the layout is from their range, and honestly it's my favourite static grass to use. Like I said in the past, I've used it on pretty much all of my layouts at this point, including my larger 00 gauge layout too. And that's because I just find it so easy to use and I always get good results with it. So I have a little technique that I like to use, but the great thing is that Warworld Scenics also have static grass kits that have a selection of their different grasses that work really well together to create certain looks. And that's really handy if you're just getting started. I should also mention that Warworld Scenics actually have a loyalty program on their website too, where you can earn points, or seeds as they call them, to use against the cost of any future orders. Now, you can sign up for this on their website, www.scenics.com, but if you sign up using the referral link I put down in the description, you'll actually earn 500 points straight away, which is basically a £5 discount you get, so it's definitely worth checking out. So yeah, thank you so much again to Warworld Scenics. You're going to be seeing more of their static grass going down on the layout later in this video, and it looks fantastic. And like I said, don't forget to click that link in the description to visit their website and sign up for their loyalty program. And now for something a little bit different. I'd like to include a short section of fencing on the layout, but I want to make sure that this fits in with the Welsh narrow gauge theme I've got going on. And so the logical choice is to have a slate panel fencing, similar to the type you might see alongside the Tallyclyn Railway. Now, as far as I know, there's no ready-made slate fencing or kits available out there, so to achieve this, I'm going to have to get creative. I have a bit of a plan for creating this slate fence, but it's not going to be easy. The first step though is to cut some very rough strips from a thin plasticard sheet. I'm deliberately letting the knife wander as I do this, as I don't want these to be the same width all the way along. And these long strips then need to be cut down to make very short little sections just over a centimetre long. And these are essentially my slate panels, and as you can see, I'm going to need quite a lot of these. And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm doing this next to a figure, that's just so I can get the height of the fence roughly in scale. Next, I want to roughen up the individual slates even more just to round off some of the edges and bring more variation into each slate. And basically the way I did this was to take each slate one at a time and mess it up a bit on the file. The key here was making sure I did something different each time and not settling into any kind of pattern. And then the last step on the workbench was to give the plastic slates a coat of grey paint on both sides. This wasn't exactly the hardest job in the world, but the slates are very small and getting through them all did take some time. Thankfully though, you don't have to sit through all that, so moving back over to the layout, the fence will run around the inside of the track on the left-hand side of the yard, following this little strip of grass. The easiest way to fix each slate in place was with superglue, as it dries so quickly, so I've just added a dot of this to a piece of plastic which I can then dip each slate in before adding it to the layout. This process definitely took a long time, and plenty of the slates fell over initially too. As I got more practice though, I did get better at getting them into position, but a pair of tweezers was definitely invaluable here. And also, if you're wondering why the slates now seem so much darker, that's because I've added a black wash over that grey paint as well, just to give them a bit more natural variation. So I'm gradually working my way around the curves slowly but surely, and you can see it's starting to come together. And then when all of the slates are in place, they do look fantastic. It took me a lot of time and hard work to get to this point, but I do think it was worth it, and it's a really nice feature to have on the layout. It's really not something you can just buy in a shop and plonk down on your model railway. It really does have to be done by hand, but that makes it all the more unique. And this is only a very short section of course, but after a full day of doing this, I really don't want to do any more. So now to join all of the slates together, I'm going to use some fine florist's wire. Originally my plan here was to weave this between the slates, but honestly this proved to be too tricky. In the end I did this process off camera, and through a bit of experimentation I decided the best route was just to fix the wire to the front of the slates instead. The wire is definitely overscale, but personally I wanted to have something joining the fence up rather than just leaving it open. Also, bear in mind as well that it looks a lot more overscale in a harsh close-up like this, rather than at a more normal viewing distance like you're seeing now. So I can now just trim the excess wire off each end of the fence. And you can see this was really easy to do with a pair of scissors, just a quick clip and off it comes. And to blend the wire into the scene a bit more, I'm going to weather it slightly by painting it brown. I'm using a fine brush here with a little bit of brown paint, and I'm just adding it in the gaps between the slates and then spreading it along the wire. This just takes away some of the shine and gives it a slightly rusty and muted effect so that it looks like the fence has been standing outside for years in all weather. And with that, my little slate fencing project is finished. It's not been easy, but I'm really glad I added this rather than having a more generic fence instead. It really does set the layout firmly in Wales in my opinion, and I have to admit, I've got quite a sense of achievement now that it's complete. So I just want to take a very quick moment to remind you that on my website I actually have a shop where I sell all different kinds of merch, from t-shirts, including this one, to photo prints, mugs, and I have some other cool stuff in the works that's coming soon as well. Now, all the money from this does go back into the channel, so if you like these types of videos where I build a layout over the course of a few weeks, well then definitely head over to shop.thatmodelrailwayguy.com and maybe pick something up so that I can keep making these videos in the future. And of course, another way to support the channel is by becoming a member. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has signed up so far. We've actually had a few new members join since the start of this 009 series too, so hello to you, and they're now going to get access to all the cool new members perks. And if you want to know what those are, well, click the join button below this video on desktop and you'll be able to see exactly what you get with all the different tiers that come from being a member. And that starts from just £1.99. So yeah, like I said, check out the shop or become a member if you'd like to support the channel and also get something for yourself too. And now it's time to take a very short break from modelling and do a rather important task that I think will make operating the layout a lot easier. Several episodes ago now, when I was just getting started with this layout build, I went through wiring up all of the point motors and their corresponding switches. Well, this mass of wires really needs to be tidied up, so today I'm going to build a nice control panel to house all this in. Now, I found this really handy kit for a control box. It's a laser cut kit, it looks really well made, and I put a link down in the description if you need one of these for your own layout. So I'm now going to attempt to assemble it, but before I do, you can just see that on the back panel I've cut out a few holes for both my power inputs and the D-sub connector to the layout. Starting with the base, I'll add one of the sides to this and the whole kit just basically slots together. So I can just add PVA into all the corners before I slot them together, and that should make the joints nice and strong. And if the joints are a little bit tight, well, the kit comes with a handy little spreader so that you can use a hammer to get the parts nice and flush. And the spreader just spreads out the impact, as you might expect, so that you don't make a dent in the wood, and it moves the pieces together. With 3 sides assembled, the back panel was then able to be added to the structure. And with the back panel on, that was quickly followed by the front. And then it came to adding the top panel, which actually has quite a large cutout. This is so you can build the box, fit all the electronics inside, and then fit a top panel on afterwards. And with the box mostly built, I can now fit all my electronics inside, so the CDU, the power sockets, and the switches. After a bit of manoeuvring, I got the D-sub socket connected, and the power sockets fit nicely into the holes I made for them too. The CDU is just inside the box at the moment too, so now I just need to fit the top panel. You can see I've marked out the track plan on this panel, and I did this really quickly just by using some black acrylic paint and masking tape. I've also drilled out holes for all the toggle switches to fit through as well, and in theory I should just be able to push the toggle switches into this. And thankfully they all line up, so now I can just go through and add the nuts to the screw threads on each switch to hold it in place. And with that done, the panel can now be fitted to the control box. This has holes that line up with screw threads on each corner of the box, so it can just be screwed together. And the great thing about this is that if I do ever need to get inside to fix a problem, all I have to do is just simply loosen a few screws rather than attempt to pry one of the sides off or dismantle the whole thing. So all in all, this isn't my neatest job, but it certainly looks a lot better than it did before. As a quick little project that took a couple of hours, this was really fun to put together, and I think I'm actually going to do something similar on my larger 00 gauge layout too. Of course, before you make a nice control panel, you need to have some points to control, and then locos to run over those points, extra track, perhaps some buildings or rolling stock. Well, for all that, you're gonna need a good model shop, and personally, I recommend D-Rails. Now, D-Rails are the other sponsors for this video, but what I find really handy about them is that they have a huge range of model railway products in various different scales and gauges, from end gauge right up to the garden railway stuff. One of the things I actually like most about derails though is that they check locos before sending them out to you. Let's face it, this has never been a cheap hobby, and buying a new loco for your layout is quite a big decision for most of us. So when it arrives, you want to know that it's going to work properly, and derails just take a lot of the stress out of this by testing it in advance. As a side note, they actually have some of the best packaging I've ever come across too. Everything is really well protected, so it's not going to get damaged in the post, and it's little things like this that really put derails above other retailers for me. So if you're in the process of building a model railway, or you're just about to start one, well, head over to derails.co.uk, and like I said, they've got a big range of model railway products, so you should be able to get hold of what you need. And now let's head back down to Gofod Tynn to do a bit more modelling, because it's time to finish off the static grass. With the static grass base now dry, it's time to add more layers over the top to give it a more wild look. So for this, I'll use the WWS layering spray over the top of the 2mm base. And the cardboard here is used just to stop the spray getting on the track or other parts of the layout. Static grass can then be added over the top of this, and once again I'm using the 4mm spring grass that I used in the yard earlier on. When used in tandem with the 2mm base layer though, the 4mm grass gives this much more of a thicker look. When I repeated this process up on the hill, I covered this rock up with some masking tape. And this was just to protect it from the layering spray, which again I used before adding more of the 4mm spring grass. The masking tape is then removed, and you can see underneath the rock has been protected from getting any grass fibres stuck to it. I repeated this whole process along the ridge on the right hand side of the hill too, again covering up any of the larger, more isolated rocks. And this shot gives you a really good view of how the static grass stands up, which is a bit more easy to see with the 4mm grass. Now, a lot of the excess fibres actually ended up at the bottom of the hill, and this had an unintended side effect which I actually quite like, which is all the grass sort of settling in between the stones and the rocks. And this has quite a natural effect to it. For example, you can see over on the right hand side here where I used less grass on the hill, well, there's less grass settling in the stones as well. And then over on the left hand side of the layout, there's more grass in between the stones here because I was using a lot more static grass here. So all I'm going to do is just cover this area in a quick coat of the layering spray, and hopefully that'll lock it all into place, and I think this is a really nice little effect. So with this longer grass, the hill is looking a little bit more natural, but to finish it off, I'm now going to add some longer 6mm fibres. Again, I used the layering spray, but in a much smaller area this time. I then added just a small patch of 6mm autumn grass. And this is just a slightly darker green. It's a very subtle difference, but that's really what I'm going for at this stage. And a few more patches were added at other points around the layout too. Something less subtle though is to add some areas of dead grass. Now this uses exactly the same process, again starting off by using the layering spray in a very small area. Then the 6mm dead grass from War World Scenics is added on over the top. This is more of a brown patchy grass though that you would see on a hot summer day, and instead of the grass being all nice and colourful, it does have areas where it's dried out, and this just helps the layout feel a little bit more realistic. So once again, I'm really pleased with all the progress I've made today. And as the tram engine trundles around, I think we can all agree that the layout looks a lot better with the grass down. From the grass up on the hill to the weeds between the track in the sidings, it really brings the layout to life, and it's quite a big step towards completion. And I'm really happy with my little slate fence as well. A few years ago, I never would have believed I could build something like that from scratch, but now I've got something like this on my layout, and I think it looks really good. Of course, there's still plenty of work to happen at Gofod Tynn. For example, there's a few gaps between all the rocks, and the layout does need to have a few buildings added to it too. That's all going to be in the next episode though, where I've got a jam-packed series finale for you. Yes, just one episode to go, but trust me, it's a good one. Thank you so much for watching, and here is a look at what's coming up in the series finale. Lots of foliage is added to the layout, I attempt to fix the station, and we find out if the layout will fit inside the suitcase.